Welcome back to Cheche. We're live on Citizen TV with a full complement of guests now. We have Christopher Nakule. He's the URP Member of Parliament for Turkana North. He's also the Vice Chair of the National Assembly's National Cohesion and Regional Integration Committee. We have Richard Onyonka, the Member of Parliament for Kititu Cheche South, a member of the Defense and Foreign Relations Committee in the National Assembly, and a former Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs. Welcome. Before the break, we were talking about the parallels between Kenya and Uganda, and we talked about the same faces appearing in Uganda. We have that in Kenya. We talked about, I think Mutegi made the point that President Museveni's Uganda is very much similar to President Moi's Kanu. Do you see any parallels, any other parallels between Kenya and Uganda?
Yeah, there are a number of parallels between Kenya and Uganda in terms of in so many avenues. The first parallel is that in as much as Kenya obeys the two-term rule in constitutionalism, Uganda managed to have an open-ended term limit. That's the first parallel. So in Kenya, after 2 terms, we have a new person in office, while in Uganda, since 1986, we have had one phase in office all along. And then another parallel between Kenya and Uganda is that Kenya has had a number of political parties changing faces. From just after 2002, we had INAC. After in 2007, we had the ODM. We formed a coalition of ODM and NAC again, which is PNU. And then in 2013, we have Jubilee coming into power. Whereas in Uganda, it has been the NRM movement all along.
Okay,
so those are some of the few parallels
that you see. That's interesting, because the whole thing with the movement, even though we have the same faces, they've been in different political vehicles, as we call them in Kenya. But Uganda's whole system was eschewed party politics. President Museveni thought that it, brought about tensions, and so you had this movement system. Do you think that that has achieved the purpose of de-escalating political tensions?
I think if you were to rate the success of Museveni as a politician, I think that is the only credit he gets, if you want to call it a credit, for the simple reason that he took a country that had become, as they say, a banana republic. He then had to conjure up and put together various interests, various communities, and make sure that he moves forward with that. He has managed to a large extent, even when the economy has been stagnating a little bit, they say a little bit more than the Kenyan economy. The credit that many of the Ugandans, when you talk to them, those who love him, will tell you that the man has brought stability. He has made Uganda now again become a country that can be recognized. We have peacekeepers in Somalia from Uganda. He then discovered oil, which of course has not brought the dividends, but largely the general feel you get for those people who support Museveni is that he has done a pretty good job for the last 30 years. But as I said, it has reached a stage where the people of Uganda feel they need to move on without Museveni.
Is that something you'd agree on? So, Muteki, I want to draw on your experience, forgive me, because you want to ask a question. Is that something you'd agree on? Because in Kenya, ethnicity dominates politics here. You don't hear as much about it in Uganda. And
in fact, that's what I wanted to say.
Right, there we go.
I think ethnicity, tribalism not entrenched as in Kenya. Maybe in the north, people might feel kind of left alone.
Yes, marginalized.
Marginalized.
Yes.
But here, Kenyans are not Kenyans. Kenyans are their tribe. And when it comes to voting, that is the essence. But in Uganda, I don't think there are certain people who say because Museveni is from the West, they will not vote for him.
No, it's true. The problem you have, I mean, not even the problem. What has actually been cementing other Ugandans who are pro-Museveni against everybody else is the issue of the kingdom of Buganda. And the existence of that kingdom scares a lot of people in Uganda who are not Baganda. And as a result of that, Museveni had to play his politics around all the other ethnic communities and bringing them together to be part of the national resistance movement, which then became a larger vessel for him to tell Ugandans we can go on in this vessel across to wherever we are going, with the intent and sole purpose of managing and politically controlling the relevance and existence of the Buganda kingdom. Because the fear in Uganda as we speak, the biggest tribal issue that is going to come up in Uganda is the Baganda who feel that history and God has given them this right to be the inherent rulers of Uganda. In fact, they have always believed over the years that Museveni was a tourist who appeared from somewhere where they take care of cattle, and he just came in and happened to take over power. But as a result of that, Museveni took this element of marginalization of all the other smaller communities in Uganda and built them into a quilt, which has made him stay in power for the last 30 years.
Surely this is a parallel with Kenya, because in the last election and during the referendum as well, you certainly had this feeling that the position you described the Baganda is occupying is occupied by central Kenya, the Kikuyu community. But let's go back a bit in history for the benefit of our viewers, David, because you seem familiar with this. Explain this tension between the Kingdom of Buganda and the rest of the country, because if we recall from our history, we know that we've had leaders of Uganda from the north. We know that that there has been violence historically between the north and south, between Christians, Catholic, Protestants, and Muslims, all sorts of things. So just very quickly,
there are many dynamics in Uganda. Maybe Mheshimiwa Nyonka here would even be better placed than I, even though I have some good history of it. But Uganda had many kingdoms. I mean, the Toro, the Ankole, and all this, and Museveni being from the Ankole, from the west of Uganda, as Mheshimiwa said, seemed to have taken over the space that the Baganda or the Buganda kingdom enjoyed. And
part of the problem also was that colonialism favored to some extent the Baganda.
So they were the privileged bigger kingdom. In fact, if you look at the Baganda and then Uganda, the name, so there is a certain entitlement they've always had. And when Museveni took over and brought the NRM movement to reorganize the structure of the state of Uganda, it neutralized the Buganda as a kingdom, but he still had to engage them for a very long time, keeping the kingdom going, and always paying homage to that kingdom. And he has managed to assuage them to get along to get their support. And it's actually the thorn in the flesh of Museveni that every time he has to accommodate the Baganda in order to rule comfortably, and anytime he tries to move away, he has to get back and reward them and keep them at the center of his administration. But it's not completely devoid of ethnicity. I mean, if you look at the support configurations in Uganda, Museveni still draws much of his support from the West. Where he started the war. I mean, Luero Triangle, in Tungamo area, going to the north in Gulu, Mbarara. That's where really he draws most of the support. Towards the east, you'll find a little more admiration for Kizza Besigye coming into Tororo and this other side. So it's also an ethnic balance that he has to sustain, but it's not as pronounced as Kenya's, because he has found a home to accommodate all the other communities, sort of, against the dominant force that would be the Buganda kingdom. And he's going on well. In fact, he always has number two coming from Buganda, or somebody in the hierarchies of his country. Pretty much the Kenyan situation. One cannot ignore Central Province, whichever arithmetics you have, because of the numerical strength they have here, and the fact that they produced the first president in this country, and therefore had this sense of having had a head start over the other communities in the state in Kenya.
Okay, thank you. That was a very, very thorough, comprehensive history lesson in 2 minutes. Mr. Nakule, do you see any problem, therefore, or any lesson for that matter, that we can learn from Mr. Museveni's astuteness as a politician?
Yeah, there are a number of...
Given the way he's managed the tensions in Uganda.
There are a number of lessons you can learn from Uganda. Having worked in Uganda for some time, one of the strong lessons we can learn as Kenyans is the issue of using political parties to bring unity among citizens. Uganda, just like CCM in Tanzania, has managed to use CCM as a vehicle to rally various tribes with the different descents into one as a country. That is one success Museveni has really managed to bring all Ugandans together. Unlike Kenyans, where political parties are formed on ethnic blocks. So Uganda very well in terms of the political party management has done very well compared to Kenya. You realize that now in Uganda there are mainly two major forces. We have the FDC as a political party, and Besigye and NRM. So most Ugandans are able to align themselves in those two political parties.
Yes.
Whereas in Kenya, every village would want to come up with its own political party to bargain the formation of a government. That's a major difference we have with Uganda, and it's only Museveni that has managed that one in Uganda. And then now the fear with the Ugandans, why they would not want to change Museveni, besides what my colleague has said, is the fear of drifting back into anarchy. Uganda, as you know, has had a long history of conflict, where a number of people lost life during their Amin's time, Okello, Tito Okello, and Obote. So from my experience in Uganda, Museveni is the pillar of hope of peace. And the fear is that without Museveni, how will the country be? Would it drift back to anarchy, or they would have another person who would put them together?
And I think Museveni also thinks that if he goes away, there'll be chaos. Just like Mo used to think that if he went away. Yeah. Museveni thinks without him there'll be no Uganda. Yeah. And that's why he wants to continue.
That is true. Mutegi, the truth about African leadership, and this comes, I think, from, I will use Kenya as a case, from being an MCA to being an MP to being a governor. If we all had a chance to rule for life, we would. I think for me, Museveni must put his thoughts together with his team to make sure that he sets up Uganda as a stable country which will have structures in place, political or otherwise, to make sure that Uganda moves on even when he may not be there. I think the way my colleague has said, the fact that Uganda now, you either have to be in the movement or you have to be in the FDC. In Tanzania, it's the same thing. You had to be either in Chadema or you had to be in CCM. And for me, I think in Kenya, this is our weakest point politically, that we need to actually shift our thinking. And that is why I was telling somebody, I totally agree with what JAP is trying to do. Let us have two political parties. If you feel that you disagree with what CORD is doing, you go to JAP. If you disagree with what is in JAP, you can then cross over to CORD.
You can just go back and forth, whichever way you choose.
Absolutely. But you see, let me just give you this simple example. How could somebody like Magufuli, whose community in Tanzania does not tally to be more than 50,000 people, end up being a president of a republic that has got 60 million people? It is simply because he was within the movement, that the issues and ideals that CCM was discussing or raising are issues which Magufuli, even after the elections, many people seem to be seeing he's moving in the direction of trying to sort out the issue of corruption, the issue of making sure that Tanzania becomes a functional state. Those are the issues that you can actually discuss with Tanzanians without asking somebody which tribe he comes from and which community does he think will benefit from the leadership in government. So to me, I think Museveni's success, as it has been said, having maintained the NRM is a success story, but the the fact that he has held on to power, the fact that he's been draconian, it has been 30 years on, is then going to diminish his legacy and is going to reduce his value as an African leader and a statesman.
The trouble is, if he doesn't actually move out quickly, when he leaves, the state will fragment again back into ethnic groups.
Absolutely.
The way they were before with regional parties. The DP will go back to being, you know, the
and we've seen that
party
example across the continent. Ivory Coast is a good example of that. But one of our viewers, Martin, agrees with you, saying that Kenya cannot learn anything from Uganda unless it's Tanzania. Kenyatta should distance himself from Museveni. He might acquire Museveni's this is defamatory. He might start behaving like President Museveni. But you led an observer mission to Tanzania. Tell us more about why Martin thinks that Tanzania is who we should be looking to.
In a nutshell, basically the Tanzanian elections were extremely well organized. The Tanzanian Electoral and Boundaries Commission, which was running the exercise, was extremely organized. The public, we never visited any polling station where you would find a member of the public telling you that we think our elections are going to be rigged. That really surprised us.
So public confidence in the Electoral Commission?
There was complete public confidence in the elections, because and this was because the team that was running the elections was believed by the Tanzanians. It was a team of very highly dignified, former retired High Court judge, university professors, and individuals who had been part and parcel of trying to come up with the electoral structure in Tanzania which would be believable. They succeeded in that. Number two, the elections in Tanzania were extremely competitive, and yet you didn't have a single case where you had defamation, where you had people throwing epithets at anybody, where people, even when Lowassa was criticizing Magufuli, he would say, I think I can do this better than Magufuli. If Magufuli is offering free education for everybody in primary school, for me I would give primary school up to university. When it was a matter of discussing the national... it was
issue-based.
It was issue-based. And this is where in Kenya we have completely failed to learn that you can actually stand up and discuss the issues of this country without necessarily becoming tribal, without defaming anybody, and you can present yourself, and the public now has changed. The public, they want to listen to positive messages, and that is what we saw in Tanzania. Finally, Tanzania, when we went on the observer mission, opened up and allowed us to visit. We were about we were 12 members of parliament. Some group went to Zanzibar, one group remained in Dar es Salaam, one came to Mwanza, and there was one group that went to Tanga, and one, I think two individuals went to a place called Bagamoyo. In general terms, we did not find anybody uncomfortable with either the questions we were asking or with us plodding and inquiring about the success and how the elections took place. The only thing that surprised us, we knew that the race was very close, but at the end of it all, I think because of CCM's engagement at the grassroots level and in the rural areas, CCM did extremely well. But on validation, what actually had happened, and whoever that decided to pick Magufuli, is because that in 5 years Magufuli had stood over a ministry on road construction and infrastructure which did 17,000 kilometers of tarmac road in the whole of Tanzania. It was unbelievable that 5 years would be that an individual would actually mobilize resources, personnel and technology to achieve such a feat, and to me that is really why he won the elections.
What about the role of social media? Because in Kenya it's quite negative. Apparently it's beginning to take negative overtones in Uganda. Did that feature in Tanzania?
Yes, it did. Unfortunately, when we went to Tanzania, that is the low point for us, is that we were actually being informed that many of the social media individuals who are tweeting and sending messages on Facebook and Twitter happen to be from Kenya. and we had to say, no, that's not our nature. We are much more softer.
No, but the truth is that some Kenyans had gone there to help the CCM there, right?
Yes, they did, but also some Kenyans actually went to help Lowassa in marketing, in branding. I think one of the largest companies from Kenya is the one which was doing the branding for Lowassa, all of it, and it was significant. I mean, we thought in Kenya, well, like me was in ODM in the last elections, you know, not this one, the 2007-8 was really a big thing, but in Tanzania, I mean, you would just look at Magufuli's rally and it was unbelievable. Everybody was in green and yellow, the sound systems, the media, the analysis, the TV stations. It was really an amazing achievement for Tanzania as a country, and I think Kenya can learn a lot from what the Tanzanians did. The exercise was extremely peaceful. The conceding by Lowassa was mature and was reasonably fulfilling for Tanzanians, because they thought, and they kept telling us, we hope Lowassa doesn't turn around and behave like Kenyans, so that we start killing each other. And for me, when we left Tanzania, we felt that we had learned something from that observation, which we went to do.
Did they go after the young vote? Uganda and Kenya, you know, we're talking about voter registration in Kenya at the moment.
Yes.
And we're targeting people who will come of age.
Yes.
Next year.
Yes.
Were there those...
in Uganda, it is actually been predicted that the young people of Uganda are going to play a very important role in deciding between Besigye and Museveni. Museveni is loved by the older, the parents, the grandparents who saw the war and all the transformation that Uganda has gone through. In that case, the young generation, of course, who are Museveni's children, expect more. They do not see the past. They are seeing their future. So they are going to play a very big role. Tanzania did the same thing. In fact, the way you would know that Tanzanian elections were targeting the youth is you would have all these prominent Tanzanian musicians going to the public places, and many of them were supporting one candidate or the other for the sake of pulling the youths into those campaigns.
Anything that you see as a parallel or, you know, similarity?
In as much as I partly agree with my colleague on the issue of taking Tanzania as a role model in democracy, I have a reservation.
Which is?
I have a reservation at the level of democracy in Tanzania. I've worked in Tanzania for 5 years, and the level of democracy where Tanzania is now is where Kenya was in 1997 and 2002. Tanzania could be sitting on a time bomb.
How so?
Very soon. Let's observe the next election.
No, why do you say that? Because you're talking about the level of democracy. What are you calling democracy?
Tanzania in itself, CCM, which is the ruling party, has dictatorial tendencies which are similar to those of Kano. Because our friends who are inside the CCM, and some of these people who came out to form the opposition were formerly strongmen in CCM. And if you look at the clout of CCM in this recent, just concluded election and previously, there's a lot of erosion going on in the party, which is synonymous to what happened to Kanu after repealing of Section 2A of the Constitution until 1997. So there is also a lot of suppression. There's also a lot of suppression in Tanzania.
Suppression of what?
Suppression of freedom of expression.
I want to agree with him. I mean, if you look at Magufuli may be popular, I mean, as a candidate and, you know, having been at the top of the CCM machinery, which was very organized. But his own nomination, I guess, was also very manipulative for him to get to be the ticket carrier of which led to Lowassa actually voting, because there was a clear scheme. And CCM has its owners. It has a core that makes decisions on the succession. It is not yet open to free contests. And so by mechanisms known to the president who was there and other, you know, top bureaucrats of the party, they are able to generate the next leader without necessarily obeying democratic principles. And that's what I think is talking about. And as they go forward to the next election, unless they begin to open up a little more, there will be disgruntlement by people who think that they would have preferred to participate in that election of the ticket carrier.
Isn't that what is also happening in South Africa?
Yeah, that is true.
Same thing with the ANC.
That is true, but for me, the observation I've made about Tanzania is three things. Number one, does their structure, which has been set up, whether flawed or not, work? My feeling is, for example, everybody knows that when we went to Tanzania, one of the things we were informed about is that President Kikwete wanted to bring in the foreign minister, Mr. Membe, who was his preferred candidate, to actually come in and take over from him. In fact, it's rumored that Membe happened to be Kikwete's relative. What actually happened is that for Magufuli to be nominated, whether it was pre-arranged, whether it was pre-arranged by the Mkapa people or not, was basically in tandem with the belief that CCM has had that it is always safer, without sounding undemocratic, to have somebody from a smaller community taking over the presidency of Tanzania than somebody from a larger community. Lowassa was a Maasai. If you look at former President Kikwete came from a small community from the Tanga area. If you look at Magufuli is basically from the Mwanza area, very, very tiny community. And even without disagreeing with my brother, the truth is, for us, I mean for me, in observing what Tanzania is doing and looking at the way Magufuli is now handling his presidency, these are the steps of the beginning of the transformation of Tanzania. Whether he succeeds or not, I do not know, because the issues in Tanzania which were making the undercurrent of resentment and disagreement are about the corruption, the mismanagement of national resources by cartels around CCM, having the prominent individuals who presumably were mismanaging the economy and always being rewarded, in that case where Lowassa himself was part of the group which was around the CCM. And I think CCM realized from the last elections
that they needed to
come in and begin to cut their losses and make sure that they go in the right direction. That is exactly what is happening in South Africa. You can see the problems that Jacob Zuma is having. And to me, this is something that Museveni will have to look at and begin to think about what are Ugandans going to do in the future.
We have to take a break now, but before we do that, some thoughts as we think about the lessons we can learn from all these elections. Good morning, Cheche. I'm sorry that our two members of parliament do not understand regional politics. In Uganda, the NRM rallying call is preaching fear of the past to the nation to hang on to power. If Museveni is genuine, he should have displayed clear succession and exit signs. In Tanzania, the rallying call, which is Mwalimu's legacy, was not CCM, but socialism, brotherhood. And this is what Mzee here in Kenya destroyed at independence. And one party, JAP, cannot solve the problem. Uhuru should stay away from Museveni completely. Let's think about that and come back to that as we come back from the break. You're watching Cheche. We're live on Citizen TV discussing elections within the context of Uganda going to the polls tomorrow. What lessons can we learn from the elections taking place within the region elsewhere? SMS us. The number is 22422, or you can tweet using the hashtag Cheche.